My fiancée said she wasn't ready to get married, but when I tracked where she spent the night, I realized she wasn't losing feelings. She was hiding another man.
The first message hit my phone just as I walked into my apartment after work. It was from my fiancée Lila, and all it said was, "We need to talk." Those 4 words, man. They're never a good sign. I texted back asking if everything was okay, but she didn't answer. The silence was louder than any response she could have given. I already knew it wasn't okay. 20 minutes later, she was at my door. She didn't sit down. She just started pacing by the couch, like she was rehearsing a breakup line she wasn't brave enough to deliver. I finally asked her what was wrong, and the words tumbled out. She said she didn't know if she wanted to get married anymore. Her voice kept wobbling between guilt and irritation, like she wanted to sound hurt but was actually just annoyed that she had to have this conversation at all. I tried to stay calm. I asked her what had changed. We were happy, or so I thought. We'd just picked out wedding invitations last week. She said she needed space. That's the classic code, isn't it? It's the polite way of saying something is terribly wrong, and you're probably the last to know. Then, right on cue, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She flipped it over so fast, like she was trying to hide a royal flush in a poker game. In that one split-second movement, I knew exactly what space meant. It had a name. I looked at her and waited. She finally admitted she'd been talking to someone else. She insisted that nothing physical had happened, but her hands were shaking and she couldn't look me in the eye. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I definitely didn't beg. I just looked at her and said, "Just be honest with me, Lila." Her honesty lasted about 8 seconds before she started contradicting herself, tangling herself up in a web of half-truths. When she finally walked out, defeated, I noticed she hadn't even taken her engagement ring off the little dish by the door where she always left it. I just sat there, staring at this little circle of gold and diamond, wondering how long she'd been planning this escape. The next morning, a sick feeling led me to check our shared location app, and there it was. She'd spent the night in a part of town she never visited. A part of town where I knew her coworker, Evan, lived. The same guy she always swore was just friendly. I didn't call her. I didn't text her. I just let it sit. I wanted to see what her next move would be. By the afternoon, she texted again, asking if we could have a calm conversation. That's code for, "I want to break up with you without feeling guilty." We met at a cafe. She arrived looking like she'd spent way too much time practicing her sad face in the mirror. She launched into her speech about how she wasn't ready for marriage, how it all felt too final. I let her finish. Then I asked, "Does Evan have anything to do with this?" She blinked like a deer caught in headlights. Her carefully constructed performance just crumbled. She said he helped her realize things, which is probably the most insulting way you can tell someone you cheated on them. He didn't help you realize anything, Lila. He was just the excuse you were looking for. I didn't accuse her. I simply told her I'd already seen where she stayed last night. The color just drained from her face. She whispered, "You weren't supposed to know yet." Yet, that one little word told me everything. This wasn't a spontaneous mistake. This was a calculated plan. She was going to quietly secure her next relationship before ending ours. She reached for my hand across the table, asking if we could part gracefully. I pulled my hand back. Graceful left the building the moment she started lying to my face. I told her we were done. And with that, she stormed out, crying loud enough for the whole cafe to turn and stare. She wanted an audience for her performance as the victim. I thought that would be the end of it, but drama rarely ends when someone wants to save their own reputation. The next day, her friends started messaging me, one by one. They were accusing me of emotionally abandoning her. Apparently, she'd been weaving this narrative for months, telling them I was cold, distant, and pushing her away. It wasn't true, not a single word of it, but lies always seem to travel faster than the truth. One of her friends even had the nerve to imply I'd driven her into someone else's arms. It was so ridiculous it was almost funny. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't owe them an explanation or a defense. The only person I owed anything to was myself, and what I owed myself was clarity. So I did something unexpected. I reached out to Evan directly and asked to meet. He agreed way too quickly, which told me he was eager to control the narrative and justify his actions. We met at a small, dimly lit bar across town where no one would know us. He walked in oozing a confidence that felt like cheap cologne. Before he even sat down, he said, "I never meant to interfere." It was a line so polished I knew he'd practiced it in the mirror. I cut to the chase. I asked him how long they'd been together. He admitted it had been going on for months. He tried to frame it like he was her emotional savior, saying Layla was confused and he was just helping her process her emotions. It was the most pretentious, self-serving excuse for cheating I'd ever heard. I told him I wasn't there to fight. I just wanted the truth. He relaxed, thinking he was off the hook. But I wasn't done. I asked him, "So, do you plan on dating her publicly now?" The silence that followed was my answer. He had no intention of being with her. He wasn't in love with her. He was just enjoying the thrill of the affair, of being the temporary escape. He was a predator, and she was just his latest prize. I stood up, thanked him for the honesty he didn't even mean to give me, and walked out of the bar, leaving him sitting there alone. 2 days later, Lila showed up at my door. She was in tears, real ones this time. She said things with Evan weren't working out because he wasn't ready for a real relationship. Surprise. Surprise. She asked if we could talk about reconciliation, her voice cracking. It was a good performance, but it lacked one key ingredient: actual remorse. I just looked at her and said no. She begged, saying she made a terrible mistake. I reminded her it wasn't one mistake, it was a series of choices. 1,000 little betrayals that led to one big one. She tried to blame Evan. She tried to blame work stress. She tried to blame her fear of commitment. She blamed everything and everyone except herself. When she finally realized that I wasn't going to take her back, her sadness switched to anger in a split second. She accused me of throwing away years together. I just calmly told her, "You threw them away the moment you started looking for an exit." She left screaming, and I shut the door quietly behind her. The sound of that click was the most peaceful thing I'd heard in weeks. The fallout came fast after that. Her friends went silent when her lies started to unravel. Word got around that Evan had apparently been involved with 2 other women at our company at the same time. Suddenly, Layla wasn't the tragic victim in her story anymore. She was just one more name on his list. I watched from a distance as she tried to repair her image, sending out apology texts to people she'd lied to. She even sent a long one to me. I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but out of a profound sense of peace. My chapter with her was closed. 2 months later, I was packing up my apartment to move across town for a fresh start. In the last box, I found the engagement ring she never came back for. And as I held it in my hand, I didn't feel anger or sadness. I just felt relief. I placed it in a drawer.